Imagine opening your energy bill and seeing a number that feels almost unreal. Not reduced, not discounted, not delayed, just zero. Month after month, year after year, nothing owed, nothing expected. It almost feels like a glitch in the system, like something must have gone wrong somewhere along the line. But for a small group of families living quietly in rural America, this is not an accident. It is not luck, it is not even something they think about, it is simply how their homes are designed to exist. No contracts, no fluctuating rates, no late notices pinned to the front door. Just a house that works with the world instead of fighting against it. And what makes this even more unsettling is not that it exists, but that it has existed for centuries, quietly refined and passed down, without ever becoming part of the modern conversation. What you are about to see is not a trend, not a hack, not something recently discovered. It is a system so simple and so effective that once you understand it, it becomes difficult to unsee. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a question starts to form. If this has always been possible, why were we never taught to build this way? The beginning of everything is not the walls, not the materials, not even the tools. It starts with a man standing still on a piece of land, doing something most modern builders would consider a waste of time. He watches the sun, not for a few minutes, but over the course of a full day, sometimes multiple days, quietly observing how light moves across the ground, where shadows settle, how long certain areas stay warm. There is no rush here, because this single decision, the orientation of the home, determines everything that follows. The structure is aligned so that its longest face greets the southern sky, not perfectly, but close enough to capture the low winter sun as it stretches across the horizon. And this is where something almost invisible begins to happen. In winter, sunlight pours into the home for hours, not just lighting the space, but warming it slowly and consistently. In summer, when the sun rises high overhead, that same wall falls into shade for most of the day, reducing heat gain without a single mechanical intervention. No switches, no settings, no energy required, just geometry doing its quiet work. If you've ever walked into a room that feels naturally comfortable without knowing why, there is a good chance you have experienced a small piece of this principle. And if you have ever felt frustrated by a house that never quite cools down or never quite holds warmth, it might be because that decision was never made in the first place. Most modern homes face the street, not the sun. It is faster, easier, more convenient for developers, but that convenience is paid for, slowly, over years, in energy that must constantly be added to correct what the house never learned to do on its own. And if this idea is already making you pause for a second, wondering how something so simple could matter so much, take a moment, maybe even drop a comment about what surprised you so far. I read those more than you might think, and they shape what I share next in ways that feel more like a conversation than a presentation. But orientation alone is only the foundation. What sits on top of that foundation is where things begin to feel intentional in a way that modern construction rarely does. Walk around one of these homes and you start to notice patterns that do not look like design choices, but rather like quiet decisions made for a reason. The southern side of the house is open, welcoming, filled with large windows that seem to invite the outside in. Not randomly placed, but carefully arranged to capture as much winter light as possible. These windows are set deep into the walls, with thick sills that extend inward like small shelves or benches. They are not decorative. They are functional, slowing the movement of air, holding warmth close instead of letting it slip away. Then you move to the northern side, and everything changes. Windows become rare, smaller, often positioned higher. It feels more closed, more protected, because that side of the house is not meant to collect energy. It is meant to conserve it. The east and west sides sit somewhere in between, balanced carefully to avoid the harsh, direct sunlight of early morning and late afternoon during the hottest months. What you are looking at is not architecture as we usually understand it. It is a system, a quiet machine that uses light as fuel and space as its mechanism. And this is where many people would assume the story ends, that this is just a clever way to stay warm in winter. But the real shift happens when you realize that the same house that gathers heat so efficiently can also release it, just as effectively when the seasons change. This is where airflow enters the picture, not as an afterthought, but as something built into the very shape of the home. Cool air is drawn in from the shaded side, typically the north, where temperatures remain lower. As the air inside the house warms, it rises naturally, escaping through high openings placed strategically along the upper structure. This creates a continuous flow, a gentle, steady movement that replaces warm air with cooler air without the need for fans or compressors. The first time you really understand this, it feels almost too simple, like there must be something missing. But simplicity is the point. A house that breathes does not need to be forced to cool itself. It does not fight the environment, it works with it. And if you've ever sat in a room with stale air, feeling that heaviness that no air conditioner seems to fix, you already know how powerful natural airflow can be when it is done right. If this is starting to shift the way you think about homes even a little, consider staying with me through this, maybe even subscribing if you feel that quiet pull to keep learning, not because you have to, but because something here feels worth understanding more deeply. Now we arrive at something that changes everything once you see it clearly. The idea that walls are not just barriers, but storage. Not storage for objects, but for heat itself. Most modern walls are designed to resist temperature change. They slow it down, but they do not hold anything. The moment the outside temperature drops, the inside begins to follow. It is a constant balancing act, requiring energy to maintain comfort. But in a home built with dense materials like stone, brick, or packed earth, something entirely different happens. Heat is absorbed slowly throughout the day, stored within the mass of the walls, and then released gradually as the temperature drops. It is not immediate, it is not dramatic, but it is consistent. And consistency is what creates comfort without effort. Imagine a space that does not suddenly become cold the moment the sun disappears, but instead stays warm, quietly releasing the energy it gathered hours earlier. That is not insulation, that is a form of energy storage built directly into the structure of the home. And once you understand that, it becomes clear why these homes do not rely on constant external input. They are designed to carry energy forward through time. And then there's the heating system itself, which at first sounds almost unbelievable in its simplicity. Instead of feeding a fire slowly throughout the day, the approach here is to burn intensely for a short period. A hot, fast fire that transfers as much energy as possible into a large mass of stone or brick. Once the fire is out, the heat remains, slowly radiating back into the space for hours, sometimes an entire day. No constant tending, no continuous fuel consumption. Just a brief moment of input, followed by a long period of steady output. There's something deeply satisfying about that rhythm. It feels less like managing a machine and more like working with a cycle. And if you have ever felt the stress of constantly adjusting thermostats, worrying about usage, watching costs climb, this kind of system feels almost peaceful by comparison. But the part that lingers the longest, the detail that tends to stay with people after everything else fades, is something rarely mentioned. It is beneath your feet. The floor, often overlooked, becomes part of the system in a way that feels almost hidden. Air is drawn through channels beneath the surface, moving slowly through the earth, picking up a stable temperature before entering the living space. It is not dramatic, you would not notice it happening, but it changes the baseline, lifting cold air just enough to make a difference before it ever reaches you. And when you step back and see all this together, orientation, windows, airflow, thermal mass, controlled heating, even the ground beneath the house working quietly in the background, it stops feeling like a collection of techniques. It starts to feel like a philosophy, a way of building that assumes the house should do most of the work, not the person living inside it. If you've made it this far, I want to pause for a second, not to push anything, but just to say this. If something in this resonates with you, even a small part of it, share that. Whether it is a comment, a thought, or just a quiet decision to look at your own space differently, that kind of reflection matters more than any metric. It turns information into something real. Because at the end of all of this, what stays with you is not just the idea of saving money or avoiding bills. It is the realization that comfort does not have to come from constant consumption. That a home can be designed to support you quietly, consistently, without asking for more every single month. And maybe the most important part is this: none of it is hidden. None of it is impossible. It has simply been set aside, overshadowed by faster, easier, more profitable ways of building. But it is still there, waiting to be understood again.